Michael Chen was always the odd one out at Stanford. From his first day in the engineering program, it was clear he looked at the world differently than his classmates. While others followed the rules and stuck to what their textbooks taught them, Michael's mind wandered down paths no one else dared to explore. That's not how things work, his professors would tell him with tired sighs whenever he shared his ideas. But Michael couldn't help it. He saw connections others missed, possibilities that seemed to float just beyond everyone else's vision. It was during his third year that Michael became obsessed with what would later change everything. In a late-night study session, flipping through an old energy journal that most students ignored, he spotted a footnote about a failed experiment from the 1970s. Most people would have moved on, but something about it caught his attention. "I think they were close," he told his roommate Tom, eyes wide with excitement. "They just didn't have the right materials back then." "But we do now." Tom yawned and rolled over in bed. "It's 3 in the morning, Mike. Some of us have normal classes tomorrow." But Michael couldn't sleep. He spent the rest of the night filling a notebook with calculations, sketches, and wild ideas about energy conversion that went against everything his professors taught. By morning, he was convinced he'd found something revolutionary, a way to store energy that was cheaper, cleaner, and more efficient than anything that existed. The problem wasn't his idea. It was how he pursued it. "Mr. Chen, you were supposed to be working on your assigned project," Professor Wilson said, arms crossed as he looked at the mess of wires and components spread across the lab table. The official project, a simple improvement to battery efficiency, sat untouched in the corner. "But this is better," Michael insisted. "Look at these numbers. If I'm right, this could store 10 times more energy using materials that cost half as much." Professor Wilson wasn't impressed. "That's not how things work here. You need to follow the curriculum." But following the curriculum meant setting aside the one thing Michael believed in most. As weeks passed, he spent less time in his regular classes and more in the lab, borrowing equipment when he could and improvising when he couldn't. His grades began to slip. First warnings came, then academic probation. "You're throwing everything away," his friend Lee told him over coffee one afternoon. "Is this really worth risking your degree?" Michael looked up from his notebook, dark circles under his eyes. "If I'm right, it's worth risking everything." Lee shook her head. "And if you're wrong?" That question haunted Michael at night, but never enough to stop him. He began sneaking into the lab after hours, using equipment without permission. He told himself it was necessary. The university had resources he needed, and his project would benefit everyone eventually. Professor Jackson caught him one night in December. "I should report this immediately," she said, looking at his unauthorized experiment taking up half the workbench. "Please," Michael begged. "I'm close to something big here." Against her better judgment, Professor Jackson, who had always seen potential in Michael, agreed to look at his work. For an hour, he walked her through his ideas, explaining how his energy storage system could work where others had failed. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "Your theory is interesting," she admitted. "But there are at least 3 fundamental problems with your approach." "I can solve those," Michael said quickly. "Perhaps," she replied, "but not by breaking rules and neglecting your other responsibilities." She made him a deal. She would give him limited access to the lab for his project if he brought his other coursework back up to passing grades. For a few weeks, Michael tried. He showed up to classes, turned in assignments, and limited his research to approved hours. But the balance didn't last. His mind was always on his invention, solving problems in his head during lectures, sketching improvements in the margins of his exams. By spring, he was back to his old ways, but worse. He began borrowing components from other labs. He skipped midterms to run tests. When a visiting professor expressed interest in his idea, Michael talked for 3 hours straight, missing a mandatory presentation for another class. "This is an intervention," Tom said one evening in April. He and 5 other friends had gathered in their dorm room. "You're going to fail out if you keep this up." "You don't understand what's at stake," Michael replied, pacing the small room. "This isn't just about passing classes. This is about changing how the world uses energy." "You can change the world after graduation," Lee reasoned. "Just play by the rules for 1 more year." Michael nodded and promised to try. His friends left feeling relieved, believing they'd gotten through to him. That night, Michael returned to the lab. The next 3 weeks were a blur of progress. Something had clicked in Michael's design, and suddenly the numbers were lining up better than ever. He created a small working model that stored energy more efficiently than he'd dared to hope. With shaking hands, he ran the tests again and again, making sure it wasn't a mistake. It wasn't. Too excited to keep it to himself. He emailed Professor Wilson and Professor Jackson, asking them to come see what he'd built. This would change everything, he was sure. They'd understand why he had broken the rules once they saw what he'd accomplished. Professor Jackson arrived first the next morning. Her expression changed from skepticism to interest as Michael demonstrated his prototype. "This is unexpected," she admitted, examining his data. "If these readings are correct—" They were interrupted by a loud bang as the lab door flew open. Professor Wilson stormed in, followed by the department head and a university security officer. "There he is," Professor Wilson pointed, "using restricted equipment without authorization. Again." Michael tried to explain, pointing to his prototype, but Professor Wilson wasn't interested. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" The older man fumed. "The centrifuge you borrowed was calibrated for a critical experiment. You've set Dr. Yamada's research back by months." Michael hadn't known. He'd just seen equipment he needed and taken it, convinced his work was too important to wait. "My project works," he said desperately. "Look at the results. It could revolutionize energy storage. Professor Jackson, tell them." Professor Jackson looked torn. "The concept shows promise," she admitted reluctantly. "But Michael, you can't just—" "I don't care if he's building a time machine," the department head cut in. "This pattern of behavior is unacceptable." Security escorted Michael from the building. His prototype and notebooks were confiscated as university property, developed using university resources. He was told to await the disciplinary board's decision. For a week, Michael barely left his room, alternating between fury that no one understood his vision and fear that he'd ruined everything. The disciplinary hearing was set for a Monday morning in early May. Michael arrived in his best clothes, hair neatly combed for the first time in months. He had prepared a speech about scientific progress and taking necessary risks. He never got the chance to deliver it. The board had already reviewed the evidence: unauthorized use of equipment, academic neglect, disregard for others' research. Professor Jackson spoke on his behalf, acknowledging his brilliance while admitting his methods were unacceptable. The verdict came quickly. Michael Chen was expelled from Stanford University, just 3 credits short of his degree. "You can appeal this decision," the board chair told him, not unkindly, "or apply for readmission after 2 years, assuming you demonstrate more maturity." But Michael wasn't listening anymore. As he walked out of the building, all he could think about was his prototype, locked away in a university lab. The work that could have changed everything, now just evidence in a disciplinary case. His phone buzzed with messages from friends, but he ignored them all except one, from Lee. "Whatever happens today, this isn't the end," she'd written. "Your brain is still your brain, expelled or not." Michael stopped in the middle of the quad, students streaming past him on their way to classes he would never attend again. Lee was right. They had taken his prototype, but not his ideas, not the knowledge in his head. As the California sun beat down on him, standing alone among crowds of students who still belonged, Michael Chen made himself a promise. This wasn't the end of his story. It was barely the beginning. The morning after his expulsion, Michael woke up in his childhood bedroom. The Star Wars posters from his high school days seemed to mock him now. How had he gone from Stanford engineering prodigy to a dropout sleeping in his parents' house at 22? His mother knocked softly before entering with a cup of coffee. The disappointment in her eyes hurt worse than the expulsion itself. "I made eggs," she said, her voice careful, like she was talking to someone who might break. "I'm not hungry." Michael turned toward the wall. His mother sighed. "When you're ready to talk about what happens next, your father and I are here. Next." Everyone wanted to talk about what came next. His friends texted about other universities that might accept transfer credits. His uncle called about a job at his tech company. Even Professor Jackson had emailed about a possible appeal. But Michael couldn't think about next when his mind was stuck on what he'd lost. Not just his degree, but his prototype, his work, his proof. For 3 days, he barely left his room. He slept through daylight and stayed awake at night, scribbling in a new notebook, trying to recreate his calculations from memory. Some came easily, Others disappeared into frustrating blank spaces. On the fourth day, his father opened the door without knocking. "Enough," he said, pulling open the curtains. Sunlight flooded the room, making Michael wince. "You've had your time to feel sorry for yourself. Now it's time to fix this." "There's nothing to fix," Michael muttered. "They took everything." His father sat on the edge of the bed. "They took your prototype." "They didn't take this." He tapped Michael's forehead. "The same brain that got you into Stanford is still right here. You don't understand." "No, you don't understand." His father cut him off. "You think you're the first person to fail? To lose something important? Your grandfather was forced to leave his country with nothing but the clothes he wore. He started over in a place where he didn't even speak the language. And you think you can't start over? Because some university says you can't use their labs anymore?" The word stung because they contained truth. Michael had been so focused on what he'd lost that he hadn't considered what he still had. That afternoon, he showered, shaved, and joined his family for dinner for the first time since coming home. His mother tried not to look too relieved. "I need to get my work back," he told them, picking at his food. "Your prototype?" his father asked. Michael nodded. "It's university property now. But my notes, my original drawings, I need those to start over." His parents exchanged looks. "Is that legal?" his mother asked carefully. "They're my ideas," Michael insisted. "I just need proof of what I was working on." The next day, Michael drove back to Stanford. He parked off campus and walked to the engineering building with his heart pounding. He had no access card anymore, but he knew Lee would be in the advanced materials lab on Thursdays. He texted her from outside. "Need a favor. Meet me by the side door." Lee appeared 5 minutes later, looking nervous. "You shouldn't be here," she said, but hugged him anyway. "Security has your picture." "I need my notebooks," Michael explained. "Not the prototype, just my original notes." Lee hesitated. "They cleaned out your locker." "Everything went to the department office. Can you get in there?" "Mike, I can't steal." "Not steal," he corrected quickly. "Just help me get what's rightfully mine." "My idea is my work." Lee looked torn. "Professor Wilson has been saying your energy storage concept violates basic physics. He's using you as an example in class of creative but fundamentally flawed thinking." Michael's face burned. "He's wrong, and I can prove it, but I need my original notes." Maybe it was their friendship, or maybe Lee also believed in his idea more than she admitted. Either way, she agreed to help. While Michael waited anxiously in a coffee shop off campus, Lee managed to talk her way into the department office as part of a student committee. She returned 2 hours later with a thin folder. "This was all I could find," she said, sliding it across the table. "They must have kept the rest as evidence for the disciplinary case." The folder contained just 3 pages of Michael's earliest notes, rough sketches from before his design had fully formed. Better than nothing, but far from what he needed. "Thank you," he told Lee, truly grateful despite his disappointment. "You risked a lot for this." Lee squeezed his hand. "Prove them wrong, okay? Not just for you, but for everyone who believed in you." Those pages became Michael's new starting point. Back in his parents' garage, he pinned them to the wall and began the painful process of recreating months of work from memory. It wasn't enough just to remember his design. He needed to rebuild a working prototype, and for that, he needed money and materials. Neither was easy to come by for a college dropout with no income. Michael found a job at a local electronics repair shop. The pay was barely above minimum wage, but the owner, Dave, let him take home broken devices for parts. Nights and weekends, Michael hunched over a workbench in the garage, salvaging components and slowly rebuilding his vision. His parents watched with a mixture of worry and pride. They didn't understand what he was creating, but they saw his determination. "Just promise me you're not building a bomb," his mother said one evening, bringing him a sandwich he hadn't asked for but desperately needed. Michael laughed for the first time in weeks. Not a bomb. Something that creates energy, not destroys it. Progress was painfully slow. Without lab equipment, Michael had to improvise tests and measurements. Some days brought breakthroughs that had him pacing with excitement. Other days ended with smoking failures that sent him back to square one. Through it all, the memory of Professor Wilson's dismissal burned in his mind. Creative but fundamentally flawed thinking. Those words became both his torment and his motivation. 2 months after his expulsion, Michael received an unexpected email from Professor Jackson. "Michael, I hope this finds you well. I wanted to let you know that the university has published a paper on failed energy storage approaches, using your work as a case study. I fought against this but was overruled. I still believe your concept had merit, despite its practical challenges. If you're continuing your work, I'd be interested to hear about your progress. Unofficially, of course. Professor J. Michael stared at the screen, emotions churning between rage and determination. They had taken his work, deemed it a failure, and were now using it to teach others what not to do. That night, he barely slept. By morning, his anger had crystallized into resolve. He would prove them wrong, not just with theories, but with a working prototype that no one could dismiss. Michael took on a second job delivering food in the evenings. Every extra dollar went toward better components. He lived on ramen noodles and coffee, losing weight his already slim frame couldn't afford to lose. His parents worried but supported him. His father, seeing Michael's dedication, converted half the garage into a proper workspace, installing better lighting and building shelves for Michael's growing collection of parts and tools. "You're going to make yourself sick," his mother warned, finding him asleep at his workbench one morning. "Still in yesterday's clothes, I'm close," Michael insisted, though in truth he'd hit another wall. His home-built prototype could store energy, but nowhere near efficiently enough to prove his concept. The turning point came from an unexpected source. Dave, his boss at the repair shop, noticed Michael's exhaustion. "Whatever you're building in that garage is eating you alive," Dave said one slow afternoon. "Want to talk about it?" Too tired to maintain his usual secrecy, Michael explained his energy storage concept in simple terms. Dave listened without interrupting, then said, "Sounds like you need better capacitors than what you're pulling from old phones. My brother works at a components warehouse. He might be able to help." That connection changed everything. Dave's brother not only provided better parts at cost, but introduced Michael to a retired electrical engineer named Howard who lived nearby. Howard was 72, with decades of experience and no academic reputation to protect. He visited Michael's garage lab, examined his prototype, and nodded thoughtfully. "Your Stanford professors were short-sighted," he said after reviewing Michael's design. "This approach has legs, but you're building it wrong." For the next several weeks, Howard became Michael's mentor, stopping by every few days to offer suggestions and help troubleshoot problems. With Howard's guidance, the prototype evolved from a jury-rigged collection of salvaged parts to a more professional device. 4 months after his expulsion, Michael had a working prototype that stored energy at 40% higher efficiency than commercial systems. Not the revolutionary leap he'd originally envisioned, but enough to prove his concept wasn't fundamentally flawed. "Now what?" Howard asked as they ran another successful test. "What's your plan?" Michael hadn't thought beyond proving his idea worked. "I guess, try to sell it to a company." Howard shook his head. "Companies will steal your idea and give you pennies. You need to protect it first. You need a patent." Patent attorneys, Michael quickly discovered, were expensive, very expensive. His savings from months of double shifts wouldn't cover even the initial consultation. When Michael explained this roadblock to his parents over dinner, his father was quiet for a long moment. "Your grandfather left me a small insurance policy when he died," he finally said. "I was saving it for a down payment on a house someday, but I think he'd rather see it used for this." Michael started to protest, but his father raised a hand. "It's an investment, not a gift. When you succeed, you can pay it back. When, not if." That vote of confidence meant more than the money itself. The patent process was slow and complicated. Michael worked with a small local firm that specialized in helping inventors. They helped him file a provisional patent application that would protect his idea for 1 year while he developed it further. With his concept legally protected, Michael began reaching out to companies. He created a presentation that explained his energy storage system in terms of its commercial potential. Howard helped him refine his pitch, cutting technical jargon and focusing on real-world applications. Michael's first meeting was with a mid-sized energy company in San Jose. He arrived early, dressed in a borrowed suit, carrying his prototype in a padded case. The receptionist gave him a visitor badge and directed him to a conference room where 3 executives waited. Michael set up his demonstration with shaking hands. He'd practiced his presentation dozens of times, but standing before these decision-makers, all the carefully memorized words seemed to evaporate. "Just show us what it does," the oldest executive said impatiently, after Michael stumbled through his introduction. So Michael did. He demonstrated how his system stored energy more efficiently, explained the cost benefits, and showed test results comparing his prototype to current technologies. When he finished, there was silence. Then the youngest executive said what Michael would hear many times in the coming months. "Interesting concept, but too untested for our investment. Come back when you have more data and production scale testing." It was a polite rejection, but a rejection nonetheless, and it wouldn't be the last. Over the next 2 months, Michael presented to 12 different companies. Some dismissed him immediately upon learning he was a college dropout. Others showed interest but offered deals that would have stripped him of ownership. "They don't believe in you yet," Howard told him after a particularly disheartening rejection. "You need to make them believe, but how?" Michael was running out of companies to approach and money to fund his work. His patent application fees had depleted his father's insurance money, and his prototype needed expensive upgrades to gather the data companies wanted to see. The answer came in the form of a tech innovation competition announced by a major energy foundation. The grand prize was $50,000 and mentorship from industry leaders. "This is it," Michael told his parents, showing them the competition website. "If I win this, everything changes." For the next 3 weeks, Michael worked day and night preparing his submission. He improved his prototype, created detailed documentation, and recorded a video demonstration. Howard reviewed everything, offering critical feedback that Michael implemented with single-minded focus. The night before the submission deadline, Michael's mother found him in the garage, still making last-minute adjustments. "Whatever happens," she told him, "we're already proud of you." Michael submitted his entry with minutes to spare. Then came the waiting, 6 agonizing weeks during which he alternated between hopeful dreams and crushing doubt. When the email finally came, Michael was afraid to open it. He gathered his parents and Howard in the living room, handed his father the laptop, and turned away. "Dear Mr. Chen," his father read aloud, "we are pleased to inform you." The room erupted. Michael had made it to the finals. He was one of 10 inventors invited to demonstrate their innovations live before the judges in Chicago. As his mother hugged him and Howard clapped him on the back, Michael felt a weight lift from his shoulders. For the first time since his expulsion, someone in the professional world was taking his idea seriously. The road ahead was still uncertain. He would face expert judges and 9 other brilliant innovators in Chicago. But standing in his parents' living room, surrounded by people who had believed in him when no one else did, Michael Chen knew one thing for certain. Stanford had been wrong to dismiss him, and now he had the chance to prove it to the world. The Chicago Innovation Competition felt like a dream to Michael. For 3 days, he was surrounded by people who spoke his language, inventors, engineers, and entrepreneurs who understood the drive to create something new. His prototype, displayed on a table in the exhibition hall, drew curious crowds who actually listened when he explained how it worked. But on the final day, when the winners were announced, Michael's name wasn't called. "4th place," the head judge told him afterward, shaking his hand. "You were so close. Your technology shows real promise, but the judges had concerns about scalability. Can it work beyond a prototype?" Michael flew home with a small honorable mention plaque and mixed emotions. 4th place meant no prize money, no industry mentorship. But the judges hadn't dismissed his idea as impossible. They'd called it promising, so what now? His father asked as they drove from the airport. "Now I prove it can scale," Michael answered, staring out the window at the California landscape. "I just need to figure out how to fund it." Reality hit hard the following Monday. His savings were nearly gone. The electronics repair shop couldn't give him more hours. His parents never mentioned rent, but Michael saw the past due notices for the mortgage. He took a second job at a warehouse, loading trucks from 6 p.m. to midnight after his day shift at the repair shop. The physical labor left his body exhausted, but his mind still raced with ideas for his invention. He scribbled notes on lunch breaks and designed upgrades in his head while lifting boxes. His garage workspace sat mostly untouched. There was no time, no money for new materials. The prototype gathered dust, a painful reminder of dreams deferred. 2 months of this brutal schedule took their toll. Michael lost weight, developed dark circles under his eyes, and snapped at his parents over small things. The creative fire that had driven him at Stanford flickered dangerously low. The turning point came unexpectedly. One evening at the warehouse, Michael was helping unload a shipment of electronic components bound for a local manufacturing company. A name on the shipping manifest caught his eye. Elaine Rivera, purchasing manager. The Elaine he remembered from Stanford? It had to be. The name was too unusual to be a coincidence. She'd been a year ahead of him, brilliant at supply chain management and material science. They'd worked together briefly on a project before she graduated. The next day, instead of going straight to the repair shop, Michael drove to the address on the shipping manifest. North Valley Tech was housed in a modest building in an industrial park. He sat in his car for 20 minutes, gathering courage, before walking in. "I'd like to see Elaine Rivera," he told the receptionist, suddenly aware of his worn clothes and unkempt appearance. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but we're old friends from Stanford. My name is Michael Chen." 5 minutes later, Elaine appeared in the lobby. She'd cut her long hair to shoulder length since graduation, and she moved with the confidence of someone comfortable in her professional role. Her smile of recognition washed away Michael's fear that she might not remember him. "Michael Chen," she said, extending her hand. "The guy who was going to revolutionize energy storage. What brings you here?" Over lunch at a nearby diner, Michael told her everything: the expulsion, his continued work, the Chicago competition, and his current struggle to move forward. He hadn't planned to be so open, but something about Elaine's attentive listening broke down his walls. "So that's my story," he finished, embarrassed at how desperate he sounded. "Working 2 jobs to survive while my big idea collects dust." Elaine was quiet for a moment, stirring her coffee thoughtfully. "Our company has been looking for ways to reduce energy costs in our manufacturing process," she finally said. "Would you be interested in showing me this prototype of yours?" That weekend, Elaine visited Michael's garage lab. She examined the prototype, asked detailed technical questions, and took notes. Unlike the executives Michael had pitched to before, she understood both the science and its practical applications. "It's not ready for full production," she admitted when she'd finished her assessment, "but it's a lot closer than you think. With the right resources and some design refinements, this could work at scale." "Resources are exactly what I don't have," Michael pointed out. Elaine tapped her notebook thoughtfully. "I might be able to help with that. My company has an innovation fund for energy-saving technologies. It's not huge, but it could provide enough to build a larger prototype and run proper tests." "Why would you do that?" Michael asked, suspicious after so many rejections. 3 reasons, Elaine replied pragmatically. "First, if this works, it solves a real problem for my company. Second, I'd negotiate a favorable licensing deal for North Valley Tech. And third," she smiled slightly, "I remember how Professor Wilson treated your ideas at Stanford. I'd enjoy seeing his face when this works." 2 weeks later, Michael presented his energy storage system to North Valley Tech's executive team. With Elaine's coaching, he focused on practical benefits, cost savings, reliability, and compatibility with existing systems. The company's chief technical officer peppered him with tough questions that Michael answered confidently, having anticipated them with Elaine's help. The outcome wasn't the full investment Michael had dreamed of, but it was a crucial first step: a 6-month development contract with enough funding to build an improved prototype and test it in one section of their manufacturing facility. "You'll need to quit your other jobs," Elaine pointed out as they celebrated over coffee afterward. "This needs your full attention." For the first time in nearly a year, Michael devoted himself entirely to his invention. North Valley Tech gave him a small workspace in their facility and access to tools and materials he could only dream of in his garage. Elaine became his project liaison, running interference with management and helping secure resources he needed. Their professional relationship quickly developed into friendship. They worked late together, shared meals, and talked about more than just the project. Michael learned about Elaine's family in New Mexico, her passion for rock climbing, and her ambition to eventually start her own company. She learned about his childhood tinkering with electronics, his complicated relationship with his parents, and his determination to prove his professors wrong. 3 months into the contract, the improved prototype was ready for installation, larger and more refined than his garage version. It was designed to store excess energy during production lulls and release it during peak usage, smoothing out the factory's power consumption. The installation day was tense. Technicians followed Michael's directions, but he checked and rechecked every connection himself. If this failed, there wouldn't be another chance. "It's going to work," Elaine assured him, standing beside him at the control panel. "Trust your design." Michael took a deep breath and activated the system. Lights flickered on the display as the storage unit came online and began monitoring the factory's power usage. For the first hour, everything seemed normal, exactly as planned. The system was recording data, but not yet intervening in the power flow. Then came the first real test. A large press activated, normally causing a power spike. The storage system responded instantly, releasing stored energy to offset the demand. The factory's main power meter showed a significantly lower draw from the grid. By the end of the day, Michael's system had reduced the factory's peak power consumption by nearly 30%, better than even he had predicted. The data showed smoother energy usage and lower overall costs. "This is impressive," the plant manager admitted, reviewing the results. "If these numbers hold up over time, the savings would be substantial." For the next 3 months, Michael's system ran continuously, underwent stress tests, and proved its reliability. Each week, he compiled data reports showing consistent energy savings and performance improvements as he refined the controls. Near the end of the contract period, Elaine called Michael into a meeting with North Valley Tech's CEO and CFO. His stomach knotted as he took a seat, unsure whether to expect congratulations or criticism. "Mr. Chen," the CEO began, "your technology has exceeded our expectations. The energy savings alone would justify continued investment. But we're also seeing reduced wear on our equipment and fewer production interruptions." Michael's tension began to ease. "We'd like to discuss next steps," the CFO continued. "We see 2 options. First, we could purchase your technology outright for use in our facilities. Or second, we could become the primary investor in a new company, with you as the technical lead, to develop and market this technology more broadly." The offer caught Michael completely off guard. He glanced at Elaine, who was smiling knowingly. I need some time to think about this," he managed. "Of course," the CEO nodded. "Take the weekend. We'll meet again on Monday." Outside the conference room, Michael turned to Elaine. "Did you know about this?" "I suggested it," she admitted. "Your technology is too important to be limited to just our company, and you're too talented to be just a contractor." That weekend was a blur of emotions and calculations. Michael called Howard for advice, explaining the offer in excited, jumbled sentences. "Slow down," the older man chuckled. "This is good news, but you need to think carefully. Starting a company is a whole different challenge than inventing something." By Sunday night, Michael had made his decision. He wanted to start a company and develop his technology further. But he was also realistic about his limitations. He knew nothing about business operations, fundraising, or marketing. Monday morning, he walked into the meeting with a counter-proposal. A new company with North Valley Tech as the primary investor, himself as chief technology officer, and one additional condition, Elaine Rivera as chief operating officer. If she was interested, the executives seemed surprised but not opposed. They asked for a few minutes to confer privately, then called Elaine into the room. "Mr. Chen has an interesting proposal," the CEO told her, explaining Michael's condition. Elaine looked at Michael with wide eyes. "You want me to run this company with you?" "No one understands both the technology and the business side better than you," Michael said simply. "I trust you." After a moment's thought, Elaine smiled. "I'm in." Within 2 months, Enerstore was officially founded. North Valley Tech provided the initial funding in exchange for manufacturing rights and an ownership stake. Michael and Elaine each held 30% of the company, with the remaining 40% split between the investor and shares reserved for future employees and additional investment. They rented a small industrial space not far from North Valley Tech and began the difficult process of scaling up from a single installation to a marketable product. Elaine handled business operations, regulatory compliance, and supplier relationships, while Michael focused on refining the technology and developing different models for various applications. Their complementary skills made them effective partners, but the pressures of a startup tested their friendship. 18-hour days, technical setbacks, and financial constraints led to heated arguments that sometimes ended with one or both of them storming out for a cooling-off period. "We need more engineering help," Michael insisted during one particularly tense meeting 6 months into their venture. "I can't debug the control software," improve the storage capacity, and develop the industrial installation guides all at once. And I can't magically create money, Elaine shot back, gesturing at their financial projections. We've got 8 months of runway left. Every new hire shortens that. Without a finished product, runway doesn't matter. They glared at each other across the table until Elaine's expression suddenly softened into a tired smile. Listen to us, she said, fighting like an old married couple. The tension broke. Michael laughed, running a hand through his disheveled hair. Maybe that's not a bad comparison. We're stuck with each other at this point. Their relationship evolved alongside the company. Late nights solving technical problems or preparing investor presentations led to deeper conversations. Michael found himself sharing thoughts and feelings he'd never voiced to anyone else. Elaine revealed her own doubts and dreams with equal openness. One evening, after successfully fixing a persistent software bug that had stumped them for weeks, they celebrated with takeout dinner in their tiny office. Elaine raised her paper cup of soda in a mock toast. To the dropout and the overachiever, she said. Stanford never saw this coming. Michael smiled but didn't drink. Can I ask you something? Why did you really help me that first day? It wasn't just about proving Professor Wilson wrong. Elaine set down her cup, suddenly serious. I saw your presentation at that competition in Chicago. You were there? You never told me. I was scouting new technologies for North Valley, she explained. When I saw your name on the program, I had to watch. You didn't remember me from Stanford. We only worked together briefly, but I remembered you. The way the professors dismissed your ideas always bothered me. So it was pity, Michael asked, not sure how he felt about that. No. Elaine shook her head firmly. It was recognition. I saw someone with an extraordinary idea who just needed a chance. The same chance I'd want someone to give me. Their eyes held for a moment too long to be casual. Michael felt something shift between them, the boundary between professional partners and something more personal blurring. Before either could speak, Michael's phone rang. It was Howard, calling with an urgent question about their patent application. The moment passed, but its impact lingered. As their first year in business neared its end, Enerstore faced a critical juncture. Their improved system worked beautifully in controlled tests, but they needed a real-world installation to prove its commercial viability. Their remaining funds would cover one major demonstration project with no margin for error. We need something visible, Elaine argued during a strategy session. Something that shows the real-world impact. Michael nodded, thinking. What about a community application? Something that helps people directly, not just businesses. The idea took shape quickly. A microgrid system for a small community center in an area with unreliable power. The installation would be complex. Enough to showcase their technology's capabilities, but manageable with their limited resources. They found a suitable location, a community center in a coastal town that served as both a gathering place and emergency shelter during storms. The center's director was receptive but cautious, unwilling to rely on unproven technology during actual emergencies. We understand your concern, Michael assured him during their presentation. We're proposing a hybrid approach. Our system working alongside your existing backup generators. If ours fails, you're no worse off than you are now. With that guarantee, the director agreed. Enerstore would install their system at a steep discount, in exchange for comprehensive performance data and the right to use the installation as a demonstration site for potential investors. The installation took 3 weeks of intensive work. Michael and Elaine were on site daily, often sleeping on cots in the community center to maximize working hours. Their small team, 2 recently hired engineers and Howard, who volunteered his time, worked alongside them, troubleshooting issues as they arose. Even more impressive, she replied. Integration with renewable sources is a priority for our resilience planning. She pulled out a tablet and showed them photos of other evacuation centers in the region. Most facilities with standard backup systems faced serious challenges after 48 hours. Some had to evacuate vulnerable residents due to power issues. Elaine leaned forward. So you're gathering data on different backup power approaches? More than that, Catherine said. I'm identifying innovations that could improve our disaster response capabilities. Your system? She gestured to their equipment. This could be exactly what we've been looking for. For the next hour, Catherine asked detailed questions about their technology, its capacity, durability, maintenance requirements, and cost projections. Michael and Elaine answered as completely as they could, occasionally exchanging glances as they realized the potential significance of this conversation. "Here's what I can tell you," Catherine finally said, putting away her notes. "FEMA is currently reviewing emergency power solutions for our Critical Infrastructure Resilience Initiative. Would you be willing to submit your technology for formal evaluation? It would involve rigorous testing, but if approved, could lead to deployment in emergency facilities across multiple states." The opportunity was beyond anything they had dared to hope for. A federal contract would provide not just funding, but credibility that could attract additional investors. "We'd need to review the requirements," Elaine said carefully. "But yes, we're definitely interested." Catherine handed them each a business card. "I'll send the application details tomorrow. And for what it's worth, I've been doing this job for 12 years and I've never seen a system perform like yours did here. This community was lucky to have you." After she left, Michael and Elaine sat in stunned silence. Finally, Elaine spoke. "Did that just happen? Did a FEMA official just invite us to apply for a federal contract?" Michael stared at the business card in his hand. "I think she did. But we shouldn't get too excited yet. Government procurement is complicated, and we're a tiny company with one successful installation. A tiny company that just powered a critical facility through a major storm," Elaine reminded him. "That counts for something." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. They returned to their workshop with valuable data from the storm deployment, and immediately began improvements based on what they'd learned. Catherine sent the promised application materials, which required extensive documentation and technical specifications. "This is more paperwork than building the actual system," Michael complained late one night as they worked through the requirements. Elaine pushed a cup of coffee toward him. "Welcome to government contracting. Keep typing." While they worked on the FEMA application, word of their success during the storm spread through professional networks. The National Guard technicians' report had been shared widely among emergency management professionals. Paul, the community center director, gave interviews to local media praising the revolutionary energy system that had kept their facility operating. Unexpectedly, Howard called with news that a trade journal wanted to publish an article about their technology. "They're focusing on innovations in disaster resilience," the older man explained excitedly. "This could bring serious attention from the industry." More surprising still was an email from Professor Jackson, Michael's former ally at Stanford. "Michael, I hope this finds you well. News of your successful deployment during the recent tropical storm has reached even our hallowed halls. I've followed your progress with interest and pride. If you're amenable, I would like to discuss the possibility of documenting your work as a case study for our engineering program. Your journey from concept to real-world application would be invaluable for our students." Professor J. Michael stared at the email for a long time before showing it to Elaine. "Are you going to respond?" she asked. "I don't know," he admitted. "Part of me wants to tell them it's too late. They had their chance to support this work and chose not to. And the other part?" Michael sighed. "The other part remembers being that student who needed someone to believe in their crazy ideas. If my story helps even one of them." He didn't finish the thought, but Elaine understood. The next day he replied to Professor Jackson, agreeing to discuss the case study. A month after the storm, their application to FEMA's evaluation program was complete. Catherine called to confirm receipt and outline next steps. "The initial review looks promising," she told them. "The Technical Evaluation Committee has fast-tracked your application based on the storm performance data. They want to conduct a site visit to your facility next month." While they waited for the site visit, Michael and Elaine faced a new challenge: scaling up production. If approved for the FEMA program, they would need to manufacture multiple systems to rigorous government specifications. "We can't do this in our current space with our current team," Elaine pointed out during a strategy session. "We need more engineers, more manufacturing capacity, and more capital." Michael nodded, the reality of their situation sinking in. "We need to raise serious investment. The North Valley Tech funding won't cover this expansion." They spent weeks preparing investor presentations, refining their business plan, and calculating exactly how much capital they would need. Howard introduced them to several angel investors he knew from his engineering days. Elaine reached out to clean energy investment groups. They even considered a crowdfunding campaign to generate publicity. The FEMA site visit came amid this flurry of planning. 3 evaluators, 2 engineers, and a procurement specialist spent a full day examining their technology, reviewing their manufacturing process, and assessing their capacity to fulfill government contracts. "Your technology is impressive," the lead evaluator told them at the end of the visit. "But we have concerns about your production capabilities. Can you reliably manufacture to our specifications at the volume we would require?" It was a fair question and one they had anticipated. "We're currently securing additional investment specifically for manufacturing expansion," Elaine explained. "We've already identified a suitable facility and the necessary equipment, and we've developed a modular design that uses standardized components wherever possible," Michael added. "This will allow for more efficient production and quality control." The evaluators seemed satisfied with their answers, but made no commitments. "We'll complete our report within 2 weeks," the lead evaluator said. "The committee will make a final decision after reviewing all the data." Those 2 weeks were the longest of Michael's life. Every phone call made his heart race, thinking it might be FEMA with their decision. Every email notification sent a surge of adrenaline through his system. To distract themselves, he and Elaine focused on investor meetings. They received encouraging feedback, but no firm commitments. Most investors wanted to see the outcome of the FEMA evaluation before writing checks. On a rainy Tuesday afternoon, 13 days after the site visit, Catherine called. "I wanted to give you a heads up before the official notification," she said without preamble. "Your technology has been approved for the Critical Infrastructure Resilience Initiative pilot program." Michael put the phone on speaker so Elaine could hear. "What exactly does that mean?" he asked, hardly daring to hope. "It means FEMA will contract with Enerstore to provide energy storage systems for 15 critical facilities across 3 states as part of our pilot deployment. If the pilot is successful, it could expand to a national program." Elaine gripped Michael's arm so tightly he winced. "When would this start?" he managed to ask. "The contract details will arrive tomorrow, but essentially we'd need the first systems deployed within 6 months. Can you meet that timeline?" Michael looked at Elaine, who nodded vigorously. "Yes, we can meet that timeline," he confirmed. After the call ended, they sat in shocked silence for several seconds before simultaneously breaking into laughter that bordered on hysteria. "We did it," Elaine finally said, wiping tears from her eyes. "We actually did it." "We've got a lot of work ahead," Michael cautioned, though he couldn't stop smiling. "Manufacturing 15 systems in 6 months will be challenging. But we'll have the contract to show investors now," Elaine pointed out. "That changes everything." She was right. The next day, when the official FEMA contract arrived, they immediately shared the news with the investors they'd been courting. Within a week, they had secured funding commitments exceeding their initial targets. North Valley Tech, seeing the potential, offered additional investment to maintain their stake in the growing company. The media picked up the story of the small startup that had won a major government contract based on their performance during a natural disaster. Local newspapers ran features on the hometown inventors saving lives with innovative technology. A national science program sent a film crew to document their work. One morning, Michael arrived at their workshop to find a courier waiting with a package from Stanford University. Inside was a formal letter from the Dean of Engineering. "Dear Mr. Chen, it has come to our attention that your groundbreaking work in energy storage has received well-deserved recognition from both government agencies and the private sector. We would like to invite you to campus to deliver a guest lecture on innovation and resilience in engineering."